What's good, fam? It's your man VGPunk here, and we are going to talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake 2. Now that Final Fantasy VII Remake has been out for a bit, and most of us who care have played it already, the discussions are swirling about what's going to be featured in the next installment. Considering this is revisiting a story that is over 2 decades old at this point, the question of what comes next might seem very simple to answer. However, anyone who has completed Final Fantasy VII Remake will tell you that it is anything but simple. Before we get into the countdown, I must warn you, there are multiple spoilers for the original Final Fantasy VII, a 23-year-old game, as well as the Final Fantasy VII Remake that just came out in this video. If you do not want to be spoiled, this is your chance to click off of the video now. I'll give you a minute. Are they gone? Yeah? Alright then, now that it's just us, those of us who have played Final Fantasy VII Remake or those who don't care about spoilers, let's get into this. Here is 10 things that we want to see in Final Fantasy VII Remake 2. Number 10. Save data from previous game. Final Fantasy VII Remake was absolutely phenomenal. It was a brilliant mix of old and new gameplay mechanics, and as I progressed through the game and leveled up my characters, I could feel myself getting more powerful. By the time I reached the end of my almost 40-hour journey, I was a certified stud. However, none of that progression will mean anything at all if it doesn't carry over to the next part. Don't get me wrong, I am very interested in seeing where this new take on the story goes from here, but I don't want to have to feel like a beginner again in the process. Hopefully they will allow us to transfer our save files and add appropriate level scaling to the enemies for those who, for some reason, decide to start their journey with the second part without having played the prior entry. Number 9. Set up for the conclusion. Now, considering where the first part of the Final Fantasy VII Remake saga takes place, this one seems a bit unlikely. The original Final Fantasy VII was a 3-disc epic adventure, and the remake was comprised only of the Midgrow section of the game, or about 1/3 of the very first disc. Now, thanks to the wonderfully subversive nature of the first remake, the story can go literally anywhere from here. However, in my perfect world, the next remake would take us to the end of the first disc, and the conclusion would be made up of locations and content from discs 2 and 3. Given how Square Enix was able to stretch the Midgrow area and pump it to the brim with amazing new content and expanded locations, I'm personally expecting this to be stretched longer, and nostalgia-driven superfans like me will likely buy it regardless. But for the sake of maintaining interest for the general public, I'm hoping they can make this an epic trilogy with the next 2 entries being longer and covering more content. Remake 1 was a great reintroduction to the world. Now it's time to cut us loose and let us see what all it has to offer. Number 8. New characters. Had anyone asked me to write this a year ago, I never would have considered even the possibility of there being new characters introduced to the Final Fantasy VII narrative, it being a classic story that we already know and love. However, due to the nature of the remake, Square Enix was able to introduce new faces to the story, and they, surprisingly so, added much more to the experience than they took away. I loved seeing, and in some cases battling, new faces in the world I've loved for well over 2 decades of my life. I kept waiting with the hope that there would be a moment where the previously unplayable characters of Biggs, Wedge, and Jessie would be added to my party for me to control. Now, that ultimately didn't happen, but now that we've gotten to the end of Remake 1 and all the cards are now on the table regarding how this story is being told, there's no reason why we can't get a new character or 2 to join our party, even if it's only on a guest member basis. However, this should not come at the expense of Number 7. The classic cast. Considering the ground that the second remake is going to need to cover, we should encounter and have gotten used to every character of the classic cast by the time we reach the end of it. While I do give them a pass for Red 13's unplayable nature in the first remake, there is absolutely no excuse for that tactic to continue down the line. I am very interested to see how the rest of the cast of characters work with the new battle system, as well as how the new graphics and voices will bring out their individual quirks, especially Number 6. Vincent and Yuffie. Yuffie? I called her Yuffie when I was a kid, but then Kingdom Hearts came out and pronounced it Yuffie, so we'll go with that. Anyway, I love these 2 characters. From my second playthrough on of the original, they were always in my party upon unlocking them. I say second because on my first playthrough, I actually neglected to unlock Vincent, so the second time I played, I figured out how to get him. I had this cool new character, arguably the coolest character design in the entire game, and the game was suddenly new again and I got to discover how a new character worked and fit into the story. For me, me, the fact that you could play the entire game without ever encountering these two is what made them so special for me, and why I always kept them in my party upon unlocking them. I would love to be able to have that same experience in Remake 2. Bring back Vincent and Yuffie and make them secret characters again. I realize that with the intricate storytelling this time around, this presents a unique challenge for Square Enix, but I have no doubt they can accomplish this. Number 5. Gold Saucer Minigames. Y'all, I absolutely loved the Gold Saucer as a kid. I would lose literal hours out of my day running around there and playing the various mini-games. It was like being in a virtual Disneyland, and I was all in on it. One of my favorite parts of Remake 1 was how wonderful Wall Market was to explore at night. It was everything I imagined it could be as a kid and so much more. So I can only dream of what they could do with the Gold Saucer this time around. Shooting hoops, playing the virtual boxing game, betting on Chocobo races, and more will be a sight to behold in the next chapter of this Final Fantasy VII Remake saga. Number 4, the Midgrow Solo. This might be a strange entry to some, but I loved this optional battle in the original. It scared the absolute life out of me during my first playthrough because most players are extremely underleveled to face it the first time they encounter it. I would try my absolute best to get through the marsh it was hiding in before it caught me and killed my entire party. Considering how the first remake was able to take a throwaway boss like the Airbuster and turn it into an epic spectacular, I get legitimate goosebumps thinking about what Square Enix can do with everyone's favorite giant snake. Number 3. Fort Condor. Fort Condor is a bit of a polarizing entry in the original game. People either love the break from the norm that it gives them, or they absolutely hate having to learn the mechanics to be successful at it in the middle of their quest. Personally, as with most items on this list, I just want to see what Square Enix will do with it this time around. While I don't expect them to make it a tactics-heavy battle again, I would like to see it represented accurately as the large-scale war that it was supposed to be. Without the 90s hardware limitations this time around, Fort Condor can be an absolute highlight of the Remake 2 experience. Number 2. Chocobos. Yes, the adorable birds themselves. Some sort of mashup of a baby chick, a raptor, and an ostrich. Chocobos are a staple in the Final Fantasy franchise. We got to see them in all their birdie glory in Remake 1, but it would be amazing to actually get to breed, ride, and race them in the second entry. I'm sure the methods of breeding the legendary gold chocobo will be just as time-consuming as it was the first time around, but ultimately totally worth it. Number 1. Eris Dies. I know. Punk, how could you possibly say that, you type angrily in the comments? Just please hear me out. I promise my family had nothing to do with this. Please don't hurt them. I love the Eris character. More so with the remake series, and the adorable quirks that have now come to life almost compelled me not to make this entry. But ultimately, I feel like there's little choice in the matter. Eris' death at the end of Disc 1 was the original big, shocking video game death for most of us. It's a moment that stuck with us and tugged on all of our heartstrings. The boss battle that takes place immediately after is one of the most brilliantly emotional video game set pieces of all time. And with the subversive nature of Remake 1, it is made crystal clear to us that things are different now, and anything is possible. However, it is that exact variable nature of the story this time around that allows the death, a staple of video game history and culture, to be shocking once again. Also, I personally think that if Eris somehow survives this time around, it will undermine the storytelling completely. It will make it seem like the changes made to the narrative were just an overly complicated way to save Eris. This can, however, be mitigated if Eris' death is replaced with another high-profile death. Personally, I was shocked that Barrett died near the end of Remake 1. I was shook to my core, but then in the boss battle that followed, I was simply in awe of how brilliant the move was. That instead of killing Eris, they killed off another beloved character. I was experiencing feelings I hadn't felt since 1997. Now, they quickly undid this upon completion of the boss fight by bringing Barrett back to life, but it was a taste of what could be. Personally, I think Eris still being the one to die is 100% the right move, but I am absolutely willing to accept them killing off someone else so long as they craft it in a way that astounds me. And there you have it. Thank you for rocking with me. What are you looking forward to in the next installment of the Final Fantasy VII Remake series? What would you like to see introduced to the narrative or the gameplay? Please let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, I have been #VGPunk, and I will see you in the mosh pit.